been over 30 years since the famous I Have a Dream speech delivered by Dr. Martin Luther King and the implementation of the civil rights. Many believe that racial inequality is a thing of the past. But have we really arrived to a place of social equality for all? Has the realization of Dr. King's dream come to fulfillment, or is it yet afar off? Good evening, Dr. Counsel and fellow classmates. My name is Kamisha Evans. Tonight I stand before you to persuade you that despite the advances made by the civil rights movement and the enactment of laws governing and protecting those civil rights, there still remains present-day civil and social inequality that violates the principal amendment of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yes, laws have been passed, Nobel Peace Prizes have been awarded for efforts to promote civil liberties in a nonviolent manner, and for the first time in our history, a black man has been voted to the highest seat of the nation. However, civil and social inequalities remain. Of course, these disparities aren't as blatant as the pre-civil rights era, but nonetheless obvious that we have not arrived to the stature that even our Pledge of Allegiance suggests: liberty and justice for all. One may ask, why change? What difference does it make? Life is good just the way that it is. I submit to you that things could always be better, and there's always room for improvement. Especially with the hard times that our economy is facing, why should we continue to make a bad situation worse by holding on to senseless civil inequalities and disparities? There's no better time than the present to unite for real and to improve the equality for life for all. In an article published by the Boston Globe titled "The End of Civil Rights, If We Really Want to Fix the Inequality, It's Time for a New Approach," written by Mr. Richard Thompson Ford, May 2009, states, "Today's most serious racial injustices aren't caused by bias and bigotry. Instead, they stem from racial injustices racial segregation and as many disadvantages that follow from the living in isolated, economically depressed, and crime-ridden neighborhoods. Today, the biggest racial problem facing our country is not discrimination, but rather the deep-rooted inequality that has created almost two different Americas." Jesse Jackson Sr. writes in Ebony Magazine, November 2008, in an article titled, "Could Obama's election mean the end of the black civil rights agenda? Yes, if we let it." He states in this article, the poverty rate among African Americans, for example, is the highest since the 1960s. Mr. Jackson also states that the walls of discrimination are down, but the bridges have not been built to close these gaps. Some examples of how racial and civil inequalities affect this country are displayed, of course, like Jesse Jackson said, in the poverty rate of America. Black Americans have the highest rate of poverty in their communities. Different health disparities such as diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease all plague African Americans more than any other ethnic group. And some of these disparities are due to the access and availability to health care and education. Before me, I have just a few examples. The top graph is displaying the poverty rate by ethnic group. And the top line is displaying the higher prevalence of poverty in the African American communities versus the bottom line being white Americans, and this middle line being all races. And this graph here is stating that the majority of households, at least 50% in most major metropolitan areas, are headed by single-family homes, usually black females. The resolve to the current issue divide requires more than simple casual conversation. It's time to arise from a state of ignorance and become proactive in dispelling civil inequalities for everyone, not just for the black race. We need to unite for real as a nation. Some ways to resolve this ongoing dilemma is to first stop acting as if this problem does not exist. It's time out for being being satisfied with status quo. We have to be informed, no longer just take things at face value. We can use similar principles that were enacted by the civil rights by one standing up and using the right that was fought for by generations before us by simply voting for those things that affect our communities. In an article in Diverse Magazine, Issues in Higher Education, written February 2009, the Obama era, a post-racial era, written by author Lydia Lum, states, "We live in a race-conscious, not a race-blind society. That is, the issue is not whether race exists, it's whether it matters. Thus, we have to ask ourselves, what difference does race make to us all?" Mr. Richard Thompson's article in the Boston Globe, The End of Civil Rights, If We Really Want to Fix Inequality, It's Time for a New Approach, states, "We must not simply continue in the tradition of civil rights movement, but to complete its work and honor its spirit, we must move beyond it." In essence, although great advances have been made through the institution of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, racial and civil and social inequality for all is more remain just more in subtle tones. Now it's time to become now is not the time to become complacent nor ignorant of the issues that are before us. Let us make a commitment to no longer idly stand by and watch others take initiative for the advancement of change for these disparities. Let us make a letter of promise detailing our intent to be proactive in our legislative process, as well as to make initiatives to evaluate everyone by the content of their character and not their skin color. Thank you.